We've been working through this semester on various aspects of valuation. We looked at discounted cash flow. We looked at precedent transaction, comparable multiple ratios valuation, and we've looked at how to calculate a weighted average cost of capital, including using the Hamada equation to unlever and relever betas. All of the pieces that we've been working on will come together in our final project and presentation. The case is Berkshire Hathaway's acquisition of Precision Castparts. So let's look at some general information that you have about preparing cases. There are some tips about reading cases and writing about cases. First, read the case once. You're going to end up reading it a bunch of times. Read it at least once. Then in your second reading, take notes, highlight. If you put yourself in the place of the decision maker, you'll make better decisions. And by taking notes, highlighting, underlining, you are more likely to put yourself in the place of the decision maker. So you need to identify what are the key issues related to this problem. What are the alternatives that you can choose from, and what are the good things and bad things about each alternative? What's the reliability of the data that you've been given? And what are the perspectives of the various players in this case? And finally, what is the decision that needs to be made? Don't rush to a conclusion. That means you're going to have to work the numbers before you are able to get an answer to this case. You don't want to make a conclusion until you realize all the aspects that relate to that conclusion. One of the things that can help you is this decide paragram. This is actually from marketing, which shows that there are marketing aspects that will help you with finance problems. The D is define the problem. A case is a story to which you have the beginning and the middle, and it's your job to write the end of that story. What is the decision to be made? What are the objectives of the company, and what are the constraints that this company or person is facing? E is enumerate the decision factors. What are the issues related to this decision, and what are the alternatives? If they're not clear, what alternatives can you come up with? What are the positive, negatives, and uncertainties related to each alternative? And in this particular case, you will find there are a lot of uncertainties that you have to deal with. Consider the relevant information. When I look at a case for the first time, I start out with the pros and the cons. I'll have one page for each alternative. Write down the list of pros, write down the list of cons. Then I'll look at those alternatives, and with some of them, I'll say, oh, this con is so bad, I can't do that. Or this pro is so good, I've got to figure out a way to do that. Most of the time, you'll be going to be in between. Again, no clear decision. You could either go either way until you evaluate all of the information. What matters, what doesn't matter, some factors are more important than others. You need to figure out which are the more important ones and assess the validity of the data that you've been given. What data are you more confident about than the others? In particular, if you're looking at comparable companies, which companies are the most comparable? And assess the validity of the data that you've been given. Which data are you more confident about than other data? So, I is identify the best alternative. You need to make a decision and explain why this is the best alternative. You are writing a persuasive paper, so you will be more persuasive if you show that you have considered the alternatives and you have decided that your alternative is the best, and you have valid reasons for rejecting the other alternatives and valid reasons for accepting your alternative. even though there may be negatives associated with that alternative. D, develop a plan for implementing the chosen alternative. Yes, you're going to have negatives. How do you combat those negatives or those uncertainties? How can you show with even those uncertainties, your choice is the best solution? And finally, evaluate the decision and the decision process. Was the decision made? Yes, you need to do that. Was the decision appropriate for the point of view that you were representing in your paper? Is this an appropriate decision for the protagonist in your paper? Next, look at writing the case. The experts, and I'm certainly not an expert, say you should start with an outline. I will admit I'm not really an outline person. I kind of start with the rough draft just to get something down on paper, edit for content and organization. Again, you're writing a persuasive paper, so you have to show that you have considered all the alternatives. Do not have more than 2 or 3 sentences that restate the case facts. The reader knows the case facts. The reader is interested in your analysis of the case, not in things that are already stated in the case. You need to look at finance theory and how that applies. Ultimately, this is a finance paper, and that's the most important part. Are you correctly applying finance theory? You do need to edit for style. Of course, you've got spell check and grammar check, and they can do a lot. But what I'm going to recommend is going to sound really weird. And when I have written something, I read it out loud. And if I'm right, and if it sounds awkward or funny in the written sentence, something I will need to rewrite if it doesn't sound right when I read it out loud. Look for sentences that are too long. And if you can't catch your breath after reading while reading that sentence, maybe your sentence is a little bit too long and needs to be edited. Of course, check all punctuation and spelling, but make sure that you are writing also in the active voice in writing your letter. So someone who has a beautifully written paper as far as English is concerned, but screws up the finance will get a lower grade than one that has perfect finance, but a few grammatical errors here and there. But I will find that I tend to focus on misspelling, so please use spell check. It just stops me when I'm reading. Not that it's important to have perfect spelling, but you want your reader of the paper to read it and understand your points, not get hung up on your misspellings. Here is a list of a few possible problems in reverse order of importance. You want to have as few spelling errors, capitalization errors as you can. Same thing, grammar and punctuation. Try to correct them, but not a fatal error. Miss words, using the wrong words. That's one that's very common, is using continual when you mean continuous. So look out for using words correctly. Don't repeat the same word or excess words. Try to be as concise as possible. Lengthy paragraphs. If you have a paragraph that's running a full page, that's too long. Lengthy sentences, more than 30 words, too long. As I said, use active voice, not passive voice. Say, I recommend, or we recommend, since it's a team project. Don't say it's recommended or it is recommended. Active voice. Now, the last two, we're getting more kinds of errors that can sink your paper. Inappropriate tone or vagueness. You're making a recommendation. You don't want to use weasel words like, well, maybe, possibly, it could be. Support your recommendation. You want to persuade the reader that your recommendation is the right one. So be decisive in supporting what your points are and factual in using the language to support your points. And the worst error is poor organization. If the reader cannot follow what you've written, then it's not making sense. You're meandering, going from point to point and then from A to B and back to A again, go back. Make certain that you were well organized. In my opinion, and you don't have to do this, subheads help you to organize, to keep your topics based on what your subheads are. These are just a few tips to help you read a case and how to write a case and how to write a persuasive paper, convincing your reader that your answer is the right answer. Thank you.